All right, well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for showing up. I'm calling to order tonight the April 4th, 2024 Strategic Plan Update Task Force meeting to order at 6:04. Tonight we have 8 regular task force members and 2 alternate present. We do have quorum. List of excused absences tonight. Task force members Katie Hurt and alternate member Scott Hall both have excused absences for this evening. We have serving in the place of regular member Katie Hunt, TJ Gunther. He's turning in. Thank you. And then we'll be serving in place for Katie tonight. Consider and then we have Adam Pugh still here as far as encourage him to participate fully in informational, alternates or have the same voices. They still have the voice, but Adam, thank you for being here as well. Public comments. Do we have any public comments? If you are on WebEx, if you are on the phone, you can press *3. If you're joined by a computer or smartphone, look for the hand icon. This varies by device. One option may be to go to the participant panel and choose to raise your hand icon and lower your right hand. Do we have any public comments?
We have one member of the public that's joined us virtually. They've not yet indicated that they'd like to make a comment. Give them one more moment. Katya is not indicating currently.
Okay. All right. So jumping into the next matter of the agenda tonight is approval of minutes from the March 14th, 2024 meeting. Anybody like to make a motion to approve the meeting minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes of March 14th.
Thank you. Thank you both. Meetings have been approved. Any comments or any discussions on the minutes? No? Okay, thank you. Next, just welcome back. We're now on we are meeting 3, so we want to look at again how we're engaged. If you do have a comment, please raise your tip card so we know, and we'll take best as we can to see who does it first, so we all get a chance. But then we have our guidelines how we'll engage. There was a little bit of a change on some of it, as maybe you may have recognized or not recognized, but again, want to just kind of lead by these guidelines. The biggest one is looking at being just uncomfortable a little bit to talk about different things that you feel in the community, different things that you're passionate about, but then also be mindful of others, be confidential in what we talk about if somebody's saying something personal. Again, recognize that everyone has their own identities, histories, and perspectives, so we need to be mindful of that. Be open, honest, and authentic. Of course, equality in voice, and then that's the intent. Any other comments that you'd like to make on that, Priti? No? You're welcome. All right, so then the next focus on the agenda is our icebreaker question tonight. With spring break around the corner next week in Issaquah and all around Pacific Northwest and summer coming up, the question of tonight will be a round robin, 30 seconds or less. What is your favorite vacation memory that you have? Who would like to kick us off? Adam, you want to start?
Sure, I'll get it started.
All right.
I saw this slide coming up and I almost went with a memory of Disneyland, and then I thought, I can't do that.
What's the happiest place on earth?
Yeah, exactly. But I think I'll go with sailing in the British River. Waking up to a beautiful morning with waves crashing across a little reef next to where we were anchored. It's absolutely beautiful.
Very nice. How are you, Jason?
Well, my opinion is that all vacations are great, but I particularly like and think that the best one is the next one. And that's what I'm looking forward to. I actually just booked a trip towards the end of the month because I don't have any planning policy. I don't have a strategic task force meeting. So I actually just bought my tickets 2 days ago. So I'll be out of here towards the end of the month. Looking forward to that. But it's always special for me to go back to Costa Rica, where a large part of my family is. So that one's always particularly special for me.
Nice. We'll just keep going around.
Right. Let's see. I guess when I was a kid growing up in Venezuela, we used to go during the summer to my uncle's farm, And he had these aqueducts that were used to water the fields and the cows and whatnot. And what they would have us do, all the young ones, was get in those aqueducts and clean them up. And then everybody would come in. We would make a huge barbecue around it, and everybody would get in there and just bathe and spend the day.
Wow.
And it's like just having fun. My earliest.
I think for me is probably motorcycling from here to Fairbanks, Alaska and back. Got there in 4 days. It's about 2,000 miles. So 2,000 miles on some back roads through BC and Yukon and stuff. It's just spectacularly gorgeous. Went with a buddy.
That's a lifetime trip right there.
Yeah, we were supposed to go to the North Slope, but they had all the gravel had washed away over the summer because it had rained, and they just said, don't attempt it. We said, we've had a great ride so far, no accidents, no problems.
Yeah, you don't want to do that.
Turn around.
It's gonna be kind of cheesy, but I feel like studying abroad in China back when I was in college and getting to see like where my grandparents grew up, like in the countryside of China, was pretty cool. Yeah.
My favorite memories are being on road trips and being spontaneous, going into small towns, byways that you weren't even planning on going to, and having an amazing experience.
My favorite memories, I did last summer and also in December 2022, Eurailing around Europe. That's always fun to do.
So I grew up in Northern California. We would go to the beaches there, which are, cold water and big rocks. And so that was always the kind of beach that I enjoyed as a kid. And now I get to take my kids to beaches like that because it's very similar to the beaches up here. Enjoy that kind of vacation.
I think for me, similar to TJ, road trips. As a kid, I used to live in the Midwest, and so we'd drive up to the Great Lakes every summer for a week, and just the car rides and listening to music, and the family time.
I'd say mine actually was last year, and I'm like Jason too, though, the next one, right? But for the past 8 to 10, actually 10 years, our vacation's been centered on my oldest daughter and her softball trips. Everything involves softball and everything else for the travel. So last year we actually had our first vacation without softball, so it was good just to go. Even though we went to Lake Chelan, it was just good to just relax, chill, be like, okay, this is what vacation feels like. You get out and run the field and get her fed and get her in bed and get her recruiters, talk to recruiters and coaches and everything else. So it was really good. So now we'll have another one this year. So we did.
So many come to mind. Probably the one that I think about the most often was my honeymoon. My husband and I spent a month in India. It was not enough time. We needed another probably 3 to 4 months, but we did a trek through the foothills of the Himalaya. And it was just one of the coolest experiences I've ever had for so many reasons that will take me longer than 30 seconds.
Nice. Well, thank y'all for sharing. We did learn a little bit about each other. And like I said, vacation season is literally here. If not, it's coming up for a lot of us. So next on the agenda we're looking at is the agenda. I think the next one, right?
Yeah, it's me.
Yeah, it's you. Turning over to Dale.
Happy Thursday. Happy April. Happy first rain in what felt like a whole week. Really excited for tonight. I feel like we've spent the last 2 meetings sort of setting the table. It was sort of like we put down the basics, and then we put down like the fish fork and the special knife and the small spoon. And now we're ready to do some eating tonight. I guess we're the opposite, where we're going to be sharing a bunch of stuff, not necessarily consuming anymore. That metaphor lost its relevance quite quickly. But I want to walk us through our agenda for tonight. So I'm going to walk us through I'm going to remind us of our purpose and objectives, and then walk us through what is an objective. Tonight is all about objectives, about brainstorming, refining the objectives for the strategic plan. And so we're going to talk a little bit about what is an objective? What the heck do we mean when we say that word? Then you'll get time in your breakout groups. They'll be the same groups from our previous meeting to break out into our 3 groups to start brainstorming and refining objectives. And you'll get a large chunk of time to do that. And there will be some structure around that. So I'll provide more guidance when we get to that portion of our meeting. Then we'll hopefully take a quick break. And then we'll come back together to briefly learn a little bit about the success measures embedded within the plan, as well as our city's performance measurement plan, which will hopefully set you up to go back into your small groups one more time and looking at the objectives that you've brainstormed, consider what would be an adequate and effective way to measure progress towards these objectives that we're starting to wrap our minds around. Then we'll close out and talk about our meeting to come. The next few slides are going to look really familiar, and they're going to keep looking really familiar. And if you show up to our last meeting with a temporary tattoo of them, it'll just make my whole year. Please don't do that though. So a reminder, our role as part of this task force is to revise and update our Issaquah strategic plan's objectives and actions, and to make a recommendation about what further community engagement around this update might look like. In the flow of our 5 planned meetings, we are directly in the middle, refining objectives and considering measurement, which built on our previous 2 meetings where we learned about the comprehensive plan, the city's functional plans, the history and context behind our original strategic plan, as well as the small update that was made a couple of years ago. Tonight will likely feel incomplete, and it should, because we have 2 more meetings after this. And so if you get to the end of this first round of brainstorming and starting to refine after getting some feedback from others on the task force, and you still feel, you leave today and you say, I feel like those objectives are not quite right, that is fine. We will revisit them again at the top of our next meeting and continue to work on them, even as we brainstorm actions. This is not a completely linear process. And so it's not like we check the box tonight saying, great, we did objectives, next we'll do actions. Likely you will leave and come back to our next meeting with different ideas informed by a little bit of time and space from this first engagement. So tonight, brainstorm and refine strategic plan background and potential objectives, and brainstorm and refine potential success measures aligned to those objectives. And then we come back on May 9th, we're going to be finalizing objectives and discussing and workshopping potential actions aligned to the objectives. Any questions before we dig in? Or like probably a million questions, but anything that would prevent you from moving forward? Mm-hmm.
So how do goals relate to objectives?
That we're going to get into in just a moment. Awesome. Okay. So I want to start this evening with a little bit of a story. It was like our vacation icebreaker question was perfectly teeing up to share a little bit about another story, a story of a family about to go on a Scottish road trip for 10 days. 2 weeks from today, literally 2 weeks from today, I will be in Scotland with my parents, my sister, and my husband, bless his heart, for 10 days. We're going to be in Edinburgh. We're going to drive to Glasgow. We're going to drive to Oban. We're going to drive out to the Isle of Skye and spend a number of days there. We're going to drive over to Inverness, down to St. Andrews, down to Stirling Castle, and back to Edinburgh. And so to frame our work tonight, I wanted to share an example with you all of what objectives might look like and sound like within maybe a more familiar context of a family vacation, something we all were just thinking a little bit about a moment ago. Marquee family vacation. This was a great activity. After I did this personal activity, I ran it by my family. So I was like, this is going to be on the public record. So if you want to watch later me talk about our family vacation, know that it will be there. And admittedly, this is not the outcome level planning that one does for the average family vacation. My advice is not to go back and say, okay, family, here's a goal. Let's work on the goal for our vacation. And here are the goal areas. And now let's write objectives. Though I think it will be quite useful for us. But a high level goal that I have and my family has agreed to since presenting the slide deck to them is that we enjoy and survive, as my sister added, this vacation, learn and experience new things, and look forward to a future family vacation together. And I propose that there were 4 main goal areas that aligned to us meeting that goal by the end of the vacation. Connection, adventure, learning and culture, and rejuvenation. Within each of these goal areas, I thought of what is a benchmark or something that is going to indicate to me that we are on our way to meeting the overarching goal within each of these areas. So for connection, one of our objectives is that all family members feel closer and more connected. A second objective that maybe will show up and maybe won't is that all family members are interested in a future trip together. That those 2 things will let us know that we're feeling more connected by the end of this trip. An adventure, each family member has tried something new. I'm not saying exactly what, but something new. And in learning and culture, each family member has increased their knowledge of Scottish history and culture. And in rejuvenation, all family members feel more relaxed and refreshed than they felt prior to the trip. And I will say that it was going to be the hardest objective for my family to meet. You can tell I'm really excited about this trip. As I thought about each of these, I then asked myself, what are some of the things we're going to do to achieve this and thus get closer to our goal, our top line goal? And so I came up with a few different things. To feel more connected and to feel closer and more connected, we could play cooperative games. I actually bought a game, specifically a cooperative game, so there will not be any competition, because that will not lead to more connection. Do at least one shared activity a day. For something new, eating traditional Scottish food, listening to Scottish folk music, having each family member plan a daily activity or contribute to the itinerary, so adding some diversity into our actual itinerary. Too bad I already planned all of it. For learning and culture, so in order to increase our knowledge of Scottish history and culture, what are some of the things we're going to do? So we could visit the Scottish National Museum, drink at least 2 whiskey distilleries. I'm kind of bummed Randy's not here. That was really a callback to Randy's on the record comment about his beverages of choice. Visit Edinburgh Castle, visit Stirling Castle, opportunities to learn and increase our our knowledge of Scottish history and culture. And rejuvenation. What are some things we could do to make sure that we feel more relaxed and refreshed than we felt prior to the trip? A spa or massage, plan for solo and separate time. It's a key one. Plan for exercise for each family member every day. And I added booking all of our accommodations so that I did not have to deal with negotiating that process. The pieces here in bold, this bold font, those are the objectives. They are I would say the sort of indicators below your goal area and your goal that are letting you know how much of something that you might achieve that's going to get you closer to your overarching goal. More simply or directly put, objectives are statements of important benchmarks towards achieving an overarching goal. And specifically, the best crafted strategic objectives are going to tell you how much of something and by when you are going to do it. So an example from the trip, by the end of the trip, each family member will have tried at least one new thing. How much? Both each family member and at least one new thing. By when? By the end of the trip. The way that might look for us as we think about the strategic plan, it might look like by 2030, community engagement in the public process will be representative of the racial, linguistic, and cultural diversity present across the city. It might look like by 2030, the city of Issaquah will increase its active partners in urban forest management and climate mitigation. So those are some examples of what a strategic objective, a time-bound, measurable strategic objective would look like. I'm gonna I'm gonna pause there actually, and then I'm gonna talk a little bit about what we already know about our original strategic objectives. But I think, Priti, to answer your earlier question, and maybe to anticipate what I think might be some of our challenge tonight, is I think it can be really natural, just to go back to this slide, to start immediately thinking about actions, things that you feel like the city should do. But what we're doing tonight, first and foremost, is trying to think about not what are the things we should do, but what are we achieving that's getting us closer to our goals.
I guess one thing I've noticed with those goals is that they're directional more so than specific, and is that kind of the intent of the strategic goals? And then further down and then further down in the setting process, it's like, the person's like, what does it mean for the task force to be representative of the diversity of the city? What increase by how much? Like increase from 0 to 1? Great.
And we're going to get into the measurement portion too, which should involve some benchmark setting potentially, or some suggestions. Maybe the recommendation isn't a specific percentage, but it's, you need to set targets for each year or something like that. Yeah, that's a great point. Because we're keeping those goal statements broader, part of getting really specific on the near term, the 5-year near term objectives, it is going to be a challenge. It's going to be one of the fun ones tonight. Yep. Other questions?
Right, so looking at the slide and looking at the boards, the bold part is the color part in each of the objective sites. And we are discussing those specific ones or coming up with new ones.
Yes.
As well.
Yes, I'm going to give you some further instruction on exactly what to do, but absolutely, you're on the right track. Okay. Before we do that, though, I want to add 2 things, and I would invite Mayor to weigh in on anything she thinks I'm missing in the history of our objectives. So some things we fully, and I feel like we've talked about this, but I think it's worth saying again. Our original objectives in the plan, we acknowledge that they weren't necessarily, although we talked about the strategic plan being a near-term 5-year plan, they weren't necessarily scoped for that time horizon. And then, of course, as we've talked about a lot, the COVID-19 pandemic beginning shortly after the adoption of the plan meant that a lot of other things kind of, maybe we could have made some progress, but there were more immediate issues that we needed to deal with. Also, some of the objectives are very measurable, and some of the objectives are very challenging to measure. And that's something that we acknowledge is true and that we'd like you all to think about as you're revising and proposing revised objectives tonight. And then the last thing I have here that I'll share from the administration's point of view is there's a little bit of apples and oranges when it comes to objectives. Some objectives are pretty straightforward, and some are very complex and may in fact have needed maybe like 4 sub-objectives to get to the objective that we stated. And so some of what we'll be thinking about tonight is maybe you think of, okay, this is an objective, but maybe there are 4 or 5 things that precede achieving that benchmark. And so I would just encourage you to not feel like you're trying to get to the perfect objective tonight, but really think expansively about, okay, if we're going to get to here, what are we going to have to do to get there? And what might have to come before that? So there's a little bit of logic that we'd ask you to play out a little bit tonight. Anything you would add to that?
Sure. Thanks, Dale. It's really fun having Dale do the update because Dale wasn't here for the original plan. So Tola was, Vicky was, I think maybe not even, maybe Vicky wasn't. So I just wanted to add a couple of comments. All objectives are not created equally. I think that's one of the big points she's trying to get across. When we first went through this exercise, it usually takes about 9 months to a year to create the first strategic plan. You're so focused on everything from the mission, vision, values, goals, objectives, measurements, timeline, how we're going to do it. But you could keep going back and wordsmithing and playing around with them forever. The council got to a point where it was like, okay, let's start with this, but because we're coming back and touching it, because we're having check-ins, we will probably do some different kinds of sorting back the next time. And so I don't believe the objectives are written in stone. I believe the council would agree that some are big, messy, and meaty. Others were not actually measurable. they're kind of all over the place, and that's not a bad thing. It just means you guys have a lot of liberty to make these a little bit or add to it. And so is that kind of your take too, when we went through all of this? It was like a huge elephant.
Well, I mean, the original goals were created by a much larger body. Right?
Yeah.
And so you got a lot more, the classic, how's it go? A camel is a horse designed by committee. So, if you have 30 people wordsmithing a goal, it's not gonna be, it's Shakespeare.
No, it moves around a bit. So, this is difficult. If you don't understand some of the language you're reading, ask, because I think what would come out when we come out of this process and we go back to our boards and commissions and the public is invited in and the council gets it, there's going to be lots and lots of touches. So I agree with Dale. Just have fun tonight. It's your first night. You are not going to get to the end line. So if it feels a little bit frustrating, we're going to do fine in the end. It's going to be great. This is a challenging exercise.
Couldn't have said it better, and so I won't say what I was going to say on this slide. So let's talk about how we're going to structure the next 45-ish minutes. Oh, yeah, TJ.
So we're introduced to all the different plans that the city of Issaquah has. A lot of departments, a lot of plans. Is it possible that some of these objectives double up with similar or exact same objective in one of the other lower level plans, and where does that get sorted out so you don't have too much measuring?
There's nothing more validating than having a question that you're excited to talk about answering and just on the next slide. So yes, and we'll talk about that. That's part of the work of today. Yeah, I got you. Actually, no, I can't give public dollars. So, so here's how we're going to attempt to do this, because the point TJ makes is a great one. We spent time engaging with those functional plans purposefully to help set the stage for thinking about a nearer term objectives. So some of the objectives in those plans are very long term. And some of what you'll be thinking about tonight is what's the nearer term, from my perspective, what might be the nearer term benchmark towards some of those objectives. Tonight, your focus is on, for the next 40 minutes, your focus is on two things. In your goal area breakout is revisions around the background or opportunity. The context matters. And so we want to make sure we've annotated some of that, but this group, you're going to be also giving some recommendations about changes to those two sections as well. And then revision to goal area objectives. So Victor, your question was, what are we exactly doing? You might keep the objective as is. You might say this objective actually is well scoped for the next site. From our opinion, for the next 5 years, we're going to keep it as is. Maybe it looks good. Great. You might make small revisions to some of the objectives to make them a little bit more measurable. You might have entirely new objectives that you feel like need to be added in. And you may recommend that some of the objectives that are there be removed. That's totally fine as well. It's a little bit anything goes, to use the mayor's words. Have some fun with this. We're going to start, and I'm going to invite you to start. You've got the posters up on the wall. You've also got copies of many of the plans, the functional plans that you engaged with at our previous meeting. I'd also invite, if you have a device that uses technology and the internet, to leverage that tonight too, if you want to dig in a little bit further to something that wasn't printed out. I've tried to save as many trees while also acknowledging that sometimes you need to have a physical copy of something in front of you. But I would start first by looking at the functional plans that are in your goal area family and doing exactly what TJ sort of posed as a question, but I would say is also a recommendation, which is to look at those plans for keywords, phrases that show up in both. Before we break, I want to add a couple more things to consider. So consider what's changed since 2018, 2019. What is planned or already underway based on your engagement with staff at our last meeting in those functional plans that applies to your goal area? And how do the strategic plan values, the values of equity, people, community prosperity, service excellence, and environment, how do they provide a lens into this revision as well? And we'll come back to those values, and specifically the value of equity after our initial brainstorm. And so we'll come back to that. Something to know going into this 40 minutes is that at the end of the 40 minutes, or if you all are like, we're ready, we want to get feedback, we're going to go through a feedback process where two of you in your group will stay with your posters, and 2 of you will move and rotate around the room. And the purpose during that time will be to both give and gather feedback and perspective. So just know that that's coming. We won't come back as a big group. I want to keep you out in your breakout groups so that you have a chance to then jot more things down, and it's a little less stand and deliver. And we're in draft mode. We're not in final objectives mode. Same groups as last time. But before we break, I want to take questions about process or how you're going to be spending this next 40 minutes. And I will say it's not going to feel super easy. It should feel a little bit messy. So I would encourage you not to feel like you need to get the perfect objectives written tonight. Any table 10s besides Jason's?
You pretty much answered my question, which is, yeah, we're not looking for perfection. This is a big throwing things against the wall, see what sticks, see what we are able to come up with. Perfection is actually kind of an enemy.
Yeah.
And then I would say also, will we get a Markey family vacation update?
Oh, when I return, we'll find out how well our objectives align to our goal and how much progress we made. And when we get to the measurement portion of this evening, I'll show you some of the measures I'm going to be using along the way. So the answer is yes. Great. Same groups as last time. You've got 2 posters that you can use to jot down thoughts. I would encourage you to have something to describe, keeping notes for the group. And if you need more posters, if you need more materials, just come and grab me. We've got plenty more. I'll say one more thing. And I did not get time to do this. And Victor, I could have had you help me, but due to the IT issues, you're probably going to come up with a lot of actions. You're going to brainstorm a lot of actions in the next 40 minutes. Try to notice if something's an action versus an objective, and stick those actions in a bike rack or parking. People call them parking lots. Our sustainability team wants me to call them bike racks. Stick them in a bike rack poster to the side, because we'll come back to those when we're together in May. Okay, without further ado. If you don't remember your group, mobility and infrastructure in the corner.
Could we have the previous slide too?
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
These are the only.
I'm making them enjoy the you're gonna be. He's the one who. It does, but it turns on the computer switch. Yeah, give me a little rock.
But not for them.
What's that?
Not for them.
Yeah.
Some city employee retaining it out, and I think this. Whatever role they can, let's just go over.
Yeah, station area, way here, like really.
think, I think, tackle the area or community outreach. Engagements.
Right, so they're going.
So I think this is just like a super base level.
Proactively managed, dedicated, responsible, change response.
Well, and what's changed from when it was written in 1883 is light rail has been pushed out. Even further.
Oh, right.
That's changed from 18 to 19.
So what?
Is it- Fish passage. Mobile project that's going on. Yeah, because it plays a role in infrastructure too. That's another factor in the environment. Something that's going to impact. In the face of better than.
Vehicles, so we know the biggest problem is fast.
Getting around and through.
Right, but again, you just think of how you got here. I mean, again, the biggest problem is Issaquah when it comes to mobility.
Many may not be easily accessible. I don't know. Yeah, but literally. I get that.
Very fast. And that goes, but that's the idea, though, right? One executive, because that would affect everything. All your structure.
There's also.
Right?
Every day.
Absolutely. I can still.
I think they're fine. Right.
City council.
So I'm hearing it's this flag here, and then we will.
That's the one objective that I don't like about that. That's the biggest part of our mobility. Infrastructure, it touches on a few different. Yeah, I think it's up to like 55.
So when I.
All four of us, actually literally. Less than an hour.
I'll take anything.
Yeah. It's because.
I don't know, and that's where.
Combine that with what that.
Like, so there is some level.
I know that we invest heavily in the certain areas. We're dealing more right in. But they were not telling us how.
Well, but. Well, like I said, that's the question.
Yeah, it's pretty broad.
These are government.
It's a little spread, so it's invested interest.
And I guess something we do, but why don't we do this thing? We have that structure, we know where we have to travel. Our buying, they're literally cleansing it.
Right.
We'll leave.
Exactly.
So the human.
That speaks to.
Human
Services.
human resources.
Not a human resource.
Right. But the human services have services to the city, the human resource come up with salary ratings and answer and do the all the types of bargaining. Right. And
There's no way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we were,
That's not.
I think that they're doing a great job.
And so.
Marketing, good talent, getting good person.
I think now, I think
There are multiple ways to leave. One of which is. There's an action. But the language around like.
Doesn't go into it. It speaks about the one, but it's always about development of the services that requires a city to the public. Right? And so. Exactly, so we talk about providing services. Here, allow the city to grow the capabilities to improve its service. Big deal, and how are we investing? Like, the top talent that is invested in the growth of
That's where I'm saying.
So people be willing to.
So maybe we'll take a
So it's a-
because this is kind of.
I think the background is kind of out of date.
Yeah.
It's kind of, it's been 2000.
Years ago, citizens might-
25.
But that's kind of like full basketball metaphor.
Right.
Why we're punishing Scott and Sonic is because when we kind of let them go, they have here once upon a football. That's still not pleading in West Scott, that they're mad. in choosing a referendum.
This is what.
That provision was that you can't buy that.
So now I'm gonna tell you.
Okay.
Enhancing is from what, I know that it's for the public, but it's great. It's, I go into a dark room. If it's from the and don't tell anyone they come into this room. I'm getting a great.
I think the red one is rating. I think that's. And I don't know where the. That should be probably we'll only spend some kind of measures to that.
Distribution.
Raising that first. Everywhere being the.
I mean,
Next wave, that's pretty challenging. So I think I was, that should be my record. And I just want to go there. Not parked on.
like, it is the rest of reading.
And that's why it's. And sometimes it's a prayer.
I wouldn't know much. Yeah, I wouldn't know. Yeah, then I can put that one up.
24, by the end of the day.
We're never gonna win on 900, we could win.
I also. Given that there's a statewide stuff.
Personnel, the one we're being with, it's like, what is it?
But that's.
Survey.
So I actually thought you're right. Well, so with your turnout, because I think the objective is more. I think it's very.
Yes.
Yeah,
Actually, would be.
I need to figure it out. Either small one.
Okay.
Not.
I told you you still have-
Yeah, the first one is yeah, the opportunity. They're big.
I bring them in.
There's too many. But it's also like.
That's what I was mentioning. It feels defined and vague at the same time.
This is.
You know what? Yeah.
I'm a better hunter.
Yeah. You're like all the way down. Really, you could. And then it goes to that. But roundabout, you might have to throw them away. Is it? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right.
Fine.
Right.
Yeah.
Extra hours. So engage.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah, my.
Right.
I still, I mean, I agree with, this.
You want to see it? But then
Yeah. Now we're doing something.
I thought it was going.
Because this part's to be.
Yeah,
Yeah. Expanding state, like you say something
In a different area too.
I'm sorry.
We have, and it's wrong like that.
like, so for example,
Where is the?
And draw the bike
I
rack.
know there's another. More
so
directly at equity, diversity, and inclusivity than city.
that's
Digital over here. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, like Bill said.
Yeah, okay.
Hope that moved along, but I know that's not the exercise.
If you have actions. That one, we don't use them.
Right, okay.
Because I think, we'll come organized. It's not gonna be all these posters here this time, but the posters will be,
You know.
like, I want to use that action, that potential and that. Actually, it's just. Either way.
Are you trying to- Sorry.
So I think one of the things that would help this campaign speaks to this whole about fire hazards. Some words in one item, plan for transportation system. Integrated with other regional entities. Place and funding some major. Because so much of.
In the tables that we had in the packet, we had historic data as part of the video. Can we get the data of how many volunteer hours? We suggested this one, so. No, but like, if we're extrapolating what,
How much?
and by how much?
It does start
Objective.
to already get to measurement.
Right.
Well-crafted objective should be pretty natural.
Exactly. Just to,
that integrates.
tell you what killing.
Yeah, but I think.
Are we gonna increase it from 2 to 4? Are we gonna double it? Is it realistic to say double? Maybe right now volunteer hours are 80,000 hours per year. Unbelievable, but is it realistic to say 160,000 by 2030? So getting that data would be beneficial to us. By how much?
Yeah, so you could get that by saying we'll leave the reaction to prepare.
Yeah. That could be it.
So that's like a benchmark kind of thing. Okay.
I'm an engineer, so I'm always.
So.
I think you could, if you put something in here,
Lots of actions.
you can't just do it. We just can't have our own system. It's gotta be.
Leader in the region.
Okay, can I say regional leader?
Region leader. Per capita.
They're talking about the same thing. remember?
Yeah, funding.
Or you could take per capita volunteers, because then that allows flexibility in how we measure.
Uh-huh. The volunteerism, maybe voter.
Exactly.
I love it.
And,
So.
and attendance.
One thing I would say is.
Can, so again,
Yeah, I mean,
audience.
I'm gonna make.
Yeah, that's the.
Audience. Plan for.
I think about
Is that?
I think I would leave the diversity.
I think it's a priority.
Funding is.
It's not.
But it also.
And if we're gonna do it in every objective.
So.
Let's all find out in different things, right?
I would agree. To your point.
Even Georgia.
It's gonna be.
Because it's like, are we gonna measure and measure one thing, or we're gonna measure everything in these games?
That's probably.
Well, I mean, I think the different measures kind of imply.
That feels to me like.
And the equity component would be disaggregated
Under
by.
objective.
I think
Is it more objective?
What is the?
That's right. I'm. Some of these. Absolutely something to work. Yeah.
Right now, we're like brainstorming.
What is it?
Yeah, but don't lose your actions. Oh, yeah, I know that. But don't lose your actions.
Inspired. We can take that away. Yeah, kind of.
Equity.
Yeah,
Yeah, I read this article. They still have the other day.
Or we can refine it.
I mean, it was kind of like, where I meant desperately, especially really. So I wondered if that's.
I think like this word of balance.
Arts keep saying we.
Like. But then it's also like, I feel like, city things often over-index on training plans and not so much. So, yeah.
I think this can be about.
Also, but, okay.
I just think you know, look at the same program.
Yeah. So I'm not sure if this is like totally necessary, maybe it's.
Is programs, then you, people and community initiatives.
I would say. I mean, I don't want to say prorate, but I mean, I would say.
Yeah, because I think. I don't necessarily bad. It might just be housing and complicated. But if we are, if we're going to talk about it.
Then just say, my point is thirty, city services and program with more equitably reflect the diverse makeup of our city.
Well,
So that's fine. Various board members and constituents saying.
I think it probably.
It is, I'm just watching you.
I mean,
It's an action.
I've never seen any.
I think it probably resides.
But then when you say the diverse makeup of our citizens, it's diverse as our citizens, right? As equitably
I'm gonna look hot take.
the diversity of.
Give you a revised.
I'm not sure that's.
And just like, well,
I'm not sure it's truly.
I didn't look at that as, I think that is an action. I think it guides it.
Reflect the diversity. So.
Develop a plan.
Exactly, yeah. More equitably reflect the citizens, the community members.
Like, why do you? Yeah, like what?
The diversity.
Yeah, like what we're doing. So you can do it.
So you can.
Say like by 2030, what do we?
also, I don't know. If it's necessarily fall in the
Yeah. Yeah, you don't need me to.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, you know, like, okay, to do what's your.
Yeah. So as a versus so I like 30. Oh, that's good.
I mean, I'm just, you said it, I was like, oh. Because that indicates a change.
Element to attention. which might be city staff.
Oh, you're good. Infrastructure would be one objective. We'll get to that.
Provide.
But again, don't spend too much time just on that one. And I would agree that the team.
Yeah, equitable in all cities.
Partners that are not, we don't control what culture, right? A great deal, for your little city.
The city should have
Maybe
in a day.
So,
A very clear understanding.
These are not as much
to support our diverse community.
Or communities.
and I think that's why some of them look right now, which is like an action plan for transportation.
You have a goal and measure.
Yeah.
So I guess we would adjust or exactly.
By public road.
Lead
So we will quadruple the amount of public comment. And that's engagement. And right now,
That is another way, that's still the.
but then that also costs,
If the government. The challenge with that is
And there's still other things. And then basically it's the
That's one of the challenges I have at work.
So
I created it,
basically the thing
and I know you have a number.
I think it's work summaries just it's tough. It's probably the toughest one. It's the order of the obvious. But
Right, and that's really.
exactly, then again, that's.
Well, yeah, still go objective, so we're gonna, we'll figure that out. But
Yeah.
the percentage of small residents.
So you have your.
No,
She's going
yeah,
to.
we're doing, I mean, one of the grants. Yeah.
Cool, although some people.
Solo cars, the percentage of solo cars.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you?
You can't, like,
Plus,
yeah.
Well, it's like, that's what.
Not
the
that we need to close the ways that do more.
mechanism.
So then you bias.
And I think also there should be, yeah, I think it should be acknowledged. We have all, you know, 11 state law.
Okay, I think we would have to the first one a little bit more.
The city, they should jump to action, basically, the amount that's being changed, this is it, that's it.
That's where like, this is.
Yeah.
That's a development. Much better.
So I don't know if there's any.
Okay, so what?
The city should.
An example of internal system besides the internet, Microsoft,
Finance,
having Wi-Fi here.
Yeah, but
ERP,
it's like the education.
customer relations management stuff.
I mean, sure, and maybe they are.
That's good.
EVs, just kind of buy more, but it's like, PhD, or right, college, nice. Like that.
A nice thing.
What?
Expect. Tools.
How great is technology? So these are really. So what is the objective statement?
Some of that is.
Well, I think the idea is a plan from. That is, develop a plan, that's an action.
Going by saying. that-
What is that action? In your mind, what is that action?
Oh, right here.
What's the objective of that action?
When-
I can still take that.
Sounds like it's
Take that as you
I think it's also.
could go get,
using.
or you could have low performance.
Yeah.
Besides it. So that's a non-word thing.
Yeah.
But like, that's kind of, that's. Like, there's relief pressure, which I think instead of like.
Right.
So an example.
Okay. So I mean, under that, my push for you all, is, what are the sub
Which
objectives?
is, I believe, directly.
Closer to.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, if, like, in addition to this thing from your.
Yeah.
It's also
Because. You got all the ideas.
Basically.
Yeah, to me, that one feels a little incomplete, and it feels like it was.
So I think, does it fit as a story?
I don't think anything was added
Okay.
since these first came out.
Yeah, I mean, I
They're all,
think.
they're all for 20.
Okay, it doesn't feel finished, like there's no actions underneath.
That was,
It was a little-
yeah.
Again, the designing by committee.
Yeah. So, okay, can we try to figure out that sort of one? To me, I think there's probably kind of, you know, process of moving to some of
I
that.
don't think it's just everything, no, I think it's being, like. Then like actually.
It says what I need to say then.
Right?
And the only hang up I have is like performing, but we are looking at this and say, oh, if we don't have that behind us, then they won't, if they won't. I don't know.
Yeah, so
It's like they say, but when. Not by
Just to-
Yeah.
So by
To better, yeah. I mean, I think this objective is fine, but then, but it's like, okay, we are active projects. And we, yeah. And then how we, that's where we're thinking, appendix or whatever. But it's gonna be part of it.
See, I mean,
Because I think like just being aware.
technology thing
like-
starts to be.
So this could be-
Once it gets to, once I think you have a nice, like engaging the respond.
Yeah.
Reach out. Is that a message like that we can target? What can we take from the high performing? So we can measure historical data.
Well, you don't need to solve that. Yeah, like, you don't need to solve that, but I just think, but it's like,
Yeah.
just know, I must know. Like, oh, okay, like, as the homeowner, I'll.
Like you say, equitably.
I think that.
We know that.
Yeah, like, oh, maybe it's almost like you should. Yeah, it's not like together. You got all sorts of, all sorts of actions over here, I love it. And I think, honestly, I don't want to see terrible.
More interesting.
I look at that objective. I ask myself
Yeah.
the same
How
thing.
much?
I just just an active partner.
17%.
That's just a fascinating.
By 7.
And
So.
I don't understand it. I mean, community members.
We can check it. You could say.
Yeah, and it's like,
And you could say.
because that's like.
Yeah, there is stuff.
Community, there we go.
Different than the being an active partner. Yeah. So I think those are really.
And maybe education is maybe education is a sub, I think the advocacy is a subject.
Yeah.
Or the action.
And this is kind of written as like.
To reflect.
And also.
Sounds good.
Just fine.
I'm just throwing stuff.
I mean, like, I mean.
25% is achievable, yeah.
Plan, but these different people, different perspectives that.
Yeah.
Having interactions.
Jamie said last time, you get each section, or these lots of environmental.
Yeah, and that's.
That's
what.
I wish it was. And look at that, he's saying something last meeting.
Yeah.
He's like, we have objectives now.
Those are like, we have discussed.
Now it's just that one he had. Like, now it's
Like law and safety.
yeah.
It's around.
Are you done? I'm sorry.
Yeah. To me, I think that's. Yeah. So I think.
To say, they need to educate the community.
Feeling.
Groups in order to collaborate.
Right. So we will start to-
Yeah.
Which is.
I mean, education, the also. Yeah.
To proceed.
Yeah.
I guess this.
the objective measures, like.
The classic is property crime versus.
I think that's fine.
Because police will define it on the solely in terms
I don't think.
of, and the community will feel if they could burglarize. Whereas in another community.
It's a map.
There's the FBI with a uniform.
Oh, yeah.
But then there's also.
Well, I think.
Yes, it's on.
I think also like it's harder.
So.
And you think that we need to keep public safety and the city services
Yeah, and I think
separately?
I mean, it's in.
I think.
I mean, separately.
Is it doing mine right? I think it's tricky. Like, I think that it's a. First of all, it's super interesting.
Yeah.
But I think the thing about the American, what is it, the American? Yeah, I think that's really important. to do that.
Yeah.
Just like these, I think. Some folks, you know.
It's not just making it also.
Right. So you can do the opposite, because we're diverse communities, they threaten and not help my behavior, right? I had a conversation with Aaron, Latino kid in the garage the other day, where they see the police and go the other way because they see them as, oh, they're out to get me, not to protect me. And that's like a punch.
One of the things, there are technologies.
Yeah.
License plate.
Yeah, I know, this is like, high level.
The same way.
If you have warrants, they provide every single license plate.
And you're
So,
not flat.
anything.
Correct.
Anything other than.
Yeah, exactly.
So I love that technology, right? Because it's just, it's.
Yeah.
Utterly logical.
And I mean, like,
Here's a license plate.
also where I just like that. It's basically right now people that. And so on there. People
The feeling of safety in the community as measured by the understanding.
But I mean.
Improved community safety.
So we're sticking with
Top one.
three.
That probably started.
Money first year, you measures and the
Right.
So I'm like, what? I think there's like some things that might make sense, but I think it is like. Yeah. And I know this, I think it's fine.
measured by.
Yeah, because it brings up a really good thing about which is, you know, this is, it's gonna be a risk.
Yeah, I was sort of worried that the street on that was
a moonshot. But
there's something that
I feel like it's still supposed to be. I can see how do you put it against signature works well. A lot of passes. How do we use pressure? It's really clear that both the city are very. Just wanted to. No. It's a moonshot.
I mean, that could be.
But it is.
So there's
Going back to the end of the conversation, there's an opportunity there to say, we want to improve equitably.
So not mentioned, kind of made.
We want, yeah, Americans, Latinos, whites, everybody to feel safer by 50%, not. Right? It's wrong.
I mean, because I just saw it, I mean, literally, I followed someone today on it's a 16-wheeler truck that was going 25. It's away from it. And he clearly is not supposed to be there, but this thing does when it gets in the spot, he completely flips that roundabout and just takes out that whole shoulder. You see his face.
Yeah, switching between subsides.
Because I'm looking to figure on the dial on all of them individually as well, so that if one is hurting, and we're not meeting the goal. Because then you don't want to I'm sure that we wouldn't do that, but it gives us this reason to say, like, oh, well, we still hit 50% because these ones are at 80 and these guys are.
Yeah, right.
Oh, they see 10,000 police out there.
All right, so we did.
And the last one.
Oh, man.
He was a timekeeper.
How we doing?
You have about like 4 minutes until I tell you you have 3 minutes.
Got it.
It's
only number 2. So all we need is another 45 minutes.
I'm gonna turn the time turner, we're gonna go back to 40 minutes ago. Yeah. I'll be in my budget. And we're gonna come back, we're gonna do a rotation, we're gonna, again, so.
Reading the first one makes me smile because I think about lazy mentors. That's one of them.
Do they bring them out in that care?
I say, so, you know, they make it, well, they're local, they're government or Disney.
The big deal is.
It's now an expanding affordable business that started in Everett. And then it's just, they're not making money, but it's still very local. I mean, like, I go there in the morning or Saturday morning.
Chris is finding the words.
So you're back to this one. This needs to be accomplished by action.
Well, I lost the strain here about what's the right wordsmith, the right perfect objectives, are we trying to capture some of our ideas, write them down?
I think,
And come back. So it's perfect.
Yeah. Social and economic. Are they speaking about the business, social and economic? Are they separating the social as in the community and the economic at the businesses? Having both.
Well, the economic rights.
So it's recognizing both.
Operation.
So the objectives.
That's what we don't control, I guess.
Read the active.
Yes. I see.
Yeah, you may end up having to kind of switch our active partner objective.
Oh, yeah. That's what I was saying earlier. Like you were saying, restriction.
And I think the bus, thing on that shows up.
Integrating agencies.
I think you talk about regional planning, operating. Yeah, the multimodal.
The objective.
Air walk.
I guess-
Everybody.
Use the objective. Of what happened. And then the way that we get there.
Something like improve.
It's actually a very good conversation.
Well, I said.
And there's no Oxford comma here, so it's an income. If this tool is exactly what you're saying.
Okay, in 5 minutes, we're gonna pause, we're gonna rotate, but I'll explain more. Don't panic, you're coming back to your groups. But you may want to be ready to talk to some other task force members about what you've been thinking about and what you maybe are struggling with.
I think we got to.
Probably one with all those.
on affordable.
Well, so we have.
Yeah, this is like. Yeah, but that's not.
You've been thinking. It's like a water. What do you? Yeah.
It's a different.
And if you're going out.
Yeah.
Thoughts that you have been
Right, or.
thinking about how they may.
IBA brings in all 4 compound.
One person here, entire while.
Description, right?
True, what, the way I look at it is are you only paying for housing 30% of your income, your household level? That's burden.
Severely burdened.
And I guess. If they have their housing burden. That's it.
I think your question, you said it before.
It's like, is it living? You would think if they stuck to their normal.
Oh, right. And then what we're saying here is.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, it's like.
To provide.
In the last 5 years.
Mayor Plumley, you're gonna be on deck for a moment here for our equity lens.
Yes. Yes.
Because if you.
These slides for them.
Oh, yeah.
I'm gonna have to get their attention here. Okay, finish up your last thought with your group for a moment. And I'm gonna give you a little bit of instruction. Got the social and economic vital. I got mobility. Mayor Polly is gathering the attention of that. Great, perfect. Okay, so we had a little bit of time. It's certainly not enough time. I'm gonna not stand in front of the screen. Our 2 groups in the back of the room are a little small, so I'd encourage you, you don't need to leave, you can't leave 2 people and send 2 people. But what we're gonna spend the next bit of time doing is 1 or 2 of your group members are gonna stay with your posters, with the process you've just engaged in. And in a moment, you're gonna welcome folks from the other 2 groups to come and learn a little bit about your process and give you a little bit of input and feedback. Potentially your group is struggling with something in particular. You're like, oh, really don't. We want to talk about reducing the stress on our streets, but we don't quite know how to talk about that. And what's a near-term objective that might work for that? That would be a great thing that you're going to come and help them weigh in on. While people are staying, other folks are moving. And what you're doing while you're moving is you're thinking about the other group's recommendations as they're starting to develop. You're asking clarifying questions. You're offering additional ideas or feedback on their draft objectives. And you're making connections to your own draft objectives. There is some big time connection between conversations happening in this corner and this corner and this corner. And so this is a chance also to see if there's already some connection emerging. Maybe something you were really struggling with that you wanted to have fit into one of your objectives. Maybe it actually fits better in a different goal area. And that's totally fine. And you might discover that in the next 20 minutes. One other element that we want to think about tonight as we're revisiting we're revising these objectives is we want to work on developing and applying an equity lens. Equity is one of the key values in our strategic plan. It is one of the values that doesn't have, however, an action plan associated with it. And so the mayor wants to talk a little bit about what this might look like or sound like, or why this is so important as we do this. And we'll return to this slide again later as well.
Thanks. The reason I want to say a few words is because some organizations are way into this work, some organizations are sort of into it, and some organizations aren't even talking about it. So we may not all be starting at the same place here. After the murder of George Floyd, the council decided that they wanted to put a focus on it and actually pull together a new board. So the equity board was formed, and they're tasked with looking at the city as an organization, not yet the city as a community, to make sure that the work that we do for the community has participating volunteers, board and commission members, and council members and mayors and staff that put this higher up when we are filtering through. It can be super exciting to look at goals and objectives and get all excited about this looks really great without going back and thinking about what could go wrong or who is not being served by this. Is there somebody that's benefiting and somebody that's being harmed? And so just at a very high level, and I really love this graphic, a lot of government programs are sometimes designed that everybody gets the same thing. You get one of these, all of you do. And that's all been turned upside down, but that doesn't get it. So when you're thinking about these kinds of actions that can change the way the community is, the way our government interacts with the community, the way we deliver services and projects, just keep in the back of your mind, at some point asking yourself a question of who is harmed and who is benefited. And of the equity checklist that our staff uses and our council has as well, Dale did a great job pulling out a couple questions. So these are just, we kind of sometimes like take a step back and ask ourselves questions, and something might just pop up where you're like, that sounded really good, but now that I think about it, we may have to approach it. So, Dale, that's you.
Great. So again, we're gonna have, at least one person has to stay with your posters. So don't just all abandon your drafting. And we're gonna rotate clockwise, and you're gonna get 10 minutes. Then we're gonna rotate again, and you're gonna get 10 more minutes. And then you will end up back at your first group, your home base, and you will have 20 minutes with your group after giving and receiving some feedback and some support. Anything to clarify before we jump in? Okay.
Yeah. Sprawling down.
Yeah, 2 weeks. I'm headed to Juneau last week. But then Scotland. It's gonna be good. I'm gonna survive, and when I'm back on May 9th, I'll let you know how our planning for objectives and measurement went.
Do you have targets as well?
Oh, I feel like it's appropriate to very briefly, I made the decision and concurred with Mayor Polly on this to have you stay in your groups a bit longer. I think that was better than coming back together, doing a more formal presentation about success measures and performance measurement. Just given that, as you all sort of realized, really excellent strategic objectives imply measurement in them very naturally. And so from the get, I think that the first group I was in, Julian was already talking about measurement even before we were talking about objectives. And so, and asking, well, how will we know? How will we know if we're getting there? And so that is a question that I invite you to take with you from tonight. But on the topic of the measurement for my own outcomes and objectives within my upcoming journey, some things that I'll be able to report back on is percentage of family members that report feeling relaxed at the beginning of the trip as compared to each day on the trip. We may use our Apple Watch, Garmin Watch heart rate monitors for average daily heart rate. Got to know. There's also some assessments one can take, a self-assessment around perceived stress. So, I already expect that baseline to be high, getting off an international flight, but let's see what happens. Let's be clear, my mother was like, I will not be measuring any of these things. And then, of course, my favorite, the number of times someone exclaims exasperatedly or sighs loudly in the car each day. You all came up.
Sorry, I have a question. How do you know that the process is not what's driving the stress? Are you measuring that?
I need to take my baseline. I probably should have taken it every week of planning for this trip. You came up with far better starts to measures as you thought about your objectives tonight. This is the dip. the dip and the dive in. We're gonna come back to this on May 9th, back here. And the hope is to revisit and start to, finalize our recommended objectives, but also at the same time to start thinking about potential actions. I saw a lot of bike racks full of potential actions already. And so these things will inform each other, but we'll dig back into this together on May 9th. And that is the last word from me.
Right. Thank you, Dale. Thank you, everybody tonight. Is there any other business announcements or greater for the good of the group? No? Any final words from our chair?
I really enjoyed the engagement and it was really fun. So I hope everyone else enjoyed it as well.
All right, with that said, our next meeting is on May the 9th here. And then with that said, I will adjourn our meeting of the Strategic Task Force at 8:31 p.m. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.